Ronald Reagan does shoot from the hip.
He's a quick draw artist. He shoots from the hip.
He talks off the top of his head and doesn't think about what he's saying, and he's not able to follow through with it. That's Mr. Reagan.
He doesn't stop and think what he's saying, and then he has to retract a lot of that.
It looks like a lack of knowing to me.
Jimmy Carter has a much better handle on the overall policy than Ronald Reagan could ever have.
Ronald Reagan has got a lot to learn, and I think President Carter is going to be teaching him.
Re-elect President Carter. At a meeting with his congressional staff, President Carter focuses on windfall profits.
We've got a good bill out of the House. We'll get the best bill we can out of the Finance Committee, fight it out to the last vote on the floor, take our case to the public. And in the final analysis, I believe that we will have a good windfall profits tax, because that's the basis of all we're trying to do in energy, and we've got to solve the energy problems.
He's fighting hard for our energy security, and he's going to win. A solid man in a sensitive job. In the White House Oval Office, the president reflects on the true nature of his job.
Harry Truman said, "The buck stops here." The most difficult decisions that arise in our country, the most difficult ones come to the president. And knowledge, interrelationships, and experience are key to making the right decisions that affect so many people.
He has the knowledge and the experience. He is a solid man in a sensitive job. President Jimmy Carter has made a strong effort not to become isolated in the White House.
My wife and I were talking today at lunch about you being up here.
Yeah, I had a nice little visit with her this morning.
And I told her that sitting around your living room with a group of farmers from Iowa, I learned more than I would meeting with 2 days' worth of so-called agricultural experts.
In moments like this, the president has come to know the people of this country very well. He's a solid man in a sensitive job. The White House is today the pivot point of some of the most important decisions in the world. It is also a home.
I don't think there's any way that you can separate the responsibilities of a husband and a father and a basic human being from that of being a president. What I do in the White House is to maintain a good family life, which I consider to be crucial to being a good president.
Husband, father, president. He's done these three jobs with distinction. There is today a whole new tradition in the American vice presidency.
There are 1.3 million more people at work today than the day you were sworn in that state alone.
Just in California?
Just in California. When I was there...
There's never before been a partnership between a president and a vice president to equal what I have with Walter Mondale. He's thoroughly familiar with the responsibilities that I have. He shares those responsibilities in the finest sense of the word.
Carter and Mondale, a team. At a White House meeting, President Carter focuses on America's health.
We know from a recent Harvard study that WIC saves up to 60% in future medical costs. All right, these are the sort of programs that we really need and the basic human services that need to be delivered.
I might say that our comprehensive nationwide health program that's been presented to the Congress, I think has an excellent chance to win congressional approval after 30 years of waiting. Jim Coleman, who was one of the authors of the Kennedy-Coleman bill, was in Florida recently explaining to retired people and to elderly people how this is a superior program for health care. It has a special emphasis on prevention, on holding down the cost of health care, and as you know, takes care of pregnant women and infant children as a top priority. And I believe that
the president is fighting for the right kind of health care for everybody. A solid man in a sensitive job. At a White House briefing, the president makes an emphatic point.
My number one responsibility is to defend this country, to maintain its security. And I put a strong defense at the top of my priority list, and it's going to be maintained that way. Thank you.
He has fought for a strong defense, for reform of the bureaucracy, for peace in the Middle East, and for our energy security.
I hope you'll go home and help me now.
The president. He's fighting for all of us.
My own inclination is to get the nose of the federal government out of local affairs and out of state affairs whenever they can be handled in a state or in a community.
He used to be a full-time farmer. He does a different kind of work today, but it's still work. Long hours of hard work.
I'll make a decision on it today.
His decisions reach out to touch the lives of millions. In the course of any day, he focuses on every vital issue facing the nation.
Our comprehensive nationwide health program that's been presented to the Congress. For us to depart from those two basic documents is a serious mistake. My number one responsibility is to defend this country, to maintain its security.
It's nothing at all like being alone in a Georgia field, driving a tractor for 10 hours in the hot sun. Yet no other candidate can match his work experience or his life experience. President Carter, a solid man in a sensitive job.
I'm Mary Tyler Moore, and I'm here to talk to women for a minute. But men are more than welcome to listen to. And please don't take my advice just because I'm a familiar face. This is something you'll have to think out for yourself. President Carter's attitude toward the women of America is clear and constructive and forward-looking, and his attitude is reflected in action. He's appointed more women to high-level jobs than any president in history. He's been consistently in favor of any legislation that would give women equal rights. Nearly half this country's women now work outside their homes, as I do. In fact, we've become a nation of two-job families. And President Carter wants our women to be able to cut through the years of disdain and delay to get the guarantees in the home and in the world that they need. This isn't a one-issue election, of course, but men and women truly concerned about women's freedom are going to vote for President Jimmy Carter. I know I am.
Join Mary Tyler Moore in re-electing President Carter.
There are more and more women who are in the same position that I am in, and I think it's very important that a woman be able to support her family, because it's happening more every day, that's a necessity.
Carol Quick is one of 26 million American women for whom work is a necessity.
Well, I don't see myself as a militant at all. I just see myself as a supporter of my family. I think that President Carter has definitely made an awareness of women for the nation, and he's done many things that I feel are for working women.
Good one.
I mean, a lot of women are married and work and are contributing to their family, and I think they deserve equal rights as well.
Yeah.
This is why I support President Carter, because I personally feel like he supports me.
I don't think taxes have been lowered in California since 1903, and Reagan sure as hell didn't lower them.
Well, I felt that Ronald Reagan wasn't too good for education in California when he was governor.
It's already common knowledge that he doubled our tax rate. He made a lot of statements about cutting back spending. He really never did. He made a lot of statements about reforming welfare. Well,
Ronald Reagan is talking these days about his record as governor of California.
Influenced by the extreme right wing.
But many Californians remember it differently.
I don't think Reagan showed enough compassion for the people of California.
What he did with the mental hospitals is a crime.
Reducing government. He didn't do a very good job of reducing government in California.
And I don't know what he did for the state at all. I don't know of anything he did for the state.
When it comes to a choice, I'll take Jimmy Carter.
I really have agreed with his stands. I've written more letters to him saying hooray for you than anybody else that's been president since I've been able to vote.
I voted for President Carter in the primary. I voted for him 4 years ago, and I'll vote for him again.
On November 4th, re-elect President Carter.
I worked hard all my life. I worked a 12, 14-hour day, 7 days a week for 40 years.
Long as I can feel as good as I do now, I feel fine about it.
John and Margaret Wynne have invested a lifetime in America, and they are still looking forward to a better future.
I think older people are quite a top priority with the President Carter.
At our age, Social Security and Medicare are the biggest concerns right now. What else would it be?
Does this bother you any?
Yeah, I think Jimmy Carter's a man that he'd come in here and sit down in that chair and I could talk right along with him.
And I think he'll work more for the older people if he can. I think he cares about the people. That's my impression of him. Because I think he's going to fight for everything that is good for the country. And I shall vote for him.
Over the past 3.5 years, in 19 American communities, the quiet rhythm of everyday life was exploded by the same memorable event. The president came to town.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mrs. Carter.
Jimmy Carter flew in not to meet with the mayor or the governor, but simply to meet with the people themselves. In high school gyms and auditoriums from Bangor, Maine to Merced, California, he stood before them without notes or advisors to answer their questions. Questions ranging from local anxieties to international policies. It's the presidential town meeting, and Jimmy Carter invented it.
We approve of your efforts in Afghanistan, but we feel it has been at some expense to the American farmer with the grain embargo. When will you lift the grain embargo?
Those are difficult questions, and before I answer them, I think I'll take off my coat, okay? It's kind of hot up here. The Soviets have invaded Afghanistan in a completely unwarranted action, so I am not going to lift the firm restraints on the Soviet Union in the foreseeable future. So I will continue to punish the Soviet Union if they stay in Afghanistan. An election year is, in a way, a difficult time for a country and obviously for those of us who hold public office. However, in many ways, it's the best year of all because it gives us a chance to confront difficult issues and to let the people be more deeply involved in shaping our country for the future. I learn a lot in a campaign, and I learn a lot in a meeting like this. What's on your mind, what your concerns are, what your doubts are, what your confidences are, what your hopes are.
My name is George Henderson, Jr. I'm a resident here in Aliquippa. I would like to ask you a question dealing with our educational system.
Our second grade children would like to ask you these questions. What part of your job do you enjoy the most? And do you get dizzy flying in Air Force One?
Do you feel that your administration has, in fact, put more women in decision-making positions than your unenlightened Republican predecessors?
Do you have any idea when the hostages in Iran will be released?
I want you to know how concerned we are with inflation. Young people are no longer able to buy homes of their own. Can you tell me what your administration is doing to reverse this situation?
I can say that I'm at least as concerned about it as you are. It's ever present on my mind. It's one of the biggest responsibilities on my shoulders and one of the most difficult questions to answer. The first thing that we can do is to set an example with the federal government policies, with tight government constraint on spending, tight monetary constraint to prevent unnecessary demand for goods, increased productivity, increased soundness of the dollar, increased export of American goods, and voluntary price and wage constraints. I believe that all of us together can turn this inflation spiral around.
My name is Laureen Michaels, and I'm from Sarah, Oklahoma. And we do welcome you to Elk City, Mr. President. And instead of a question, I have a comment. As a citizen of the United States of America, of Western Oklahoma, and of the rural community, and more particularly as mother of three teenage sons, I want to express to you my personal prayers and gratitude for your role as peacemaker in the world today.
President Carter. The people have come to respect his energy, his dedication, and his good sense.
I think it's a big risk to have Reagan as president. Reagan scares me.
Ronald Reagan is not a man that I would want leading our country for any period of time.
I just can't imagine him being president. It's too complex a job.
I think he would have gotten us into a war right by this time. Carter certainly hasn't.
It wasn't until President Carter came that we really had, for the first time, peace between Egypt and Israel.
I've got to vote for Jimmy Carter, really.
Re-elect President Carter.
If you didn't like farming, you wouldn't be farming in the first place. I think it's the best life there is.
The American family farm. Its future now depends on men like Dude Haynes and his children.
Come back again.
I think that President Carter, when he decided to put the embargo into effect, he knew that it was the just decision to do it. And a lot of people think the farmers kind of took it on the chin, but we didn't get into war over it. And so what monies we might have lost really is a pretty cheap price to pay for freedom, really. We've exported more grain in the last 4 years than we have in history. That's just milled our good. And so I can't help but be optimistic about the next 4 years with President Carter.
To me, the American dream is to have a better life for all people.
To give our children more than we had, a better education, a better opportunity to live a fuller life.
How's it going?
I think that's one thing that we're all after. Working in a steel mill has been one of the best things that ever happened to me. I've been able to go in and do a good day's work and get a good day's pay.
The American dream is not a dream at all. It's the labor of millions of working Americans like David Janes.
I think the president is more aware of the problems that the working man faces than either Reagan or Anderson.
That's good and well, because that's certainly where we are, our family, our working class people. I think he understands that. His faith in us as a people gives me confidence in him as a president.
A president spends most of his long working day dealing with people. People who come to the Oval Office for a meeting. People at all the ceremonies he must attend. People who come to greet him at an airport. Yet the time that a president can get to spend alone is perhaps his most valuable time. The future path of the nation hinges to a great degree on his decisions, and the energy to make them must be channeled into quiet periods of thought. He must see one side and then the other of questions that touch the lives of millions, and then decide. Even under pressure, the decisions must be measured, careful, statesmanlike. No matter how many advisors and assistants, the president can never escape the responsibility of truly understanding an issue himself. That is the only way that a presidential decision can be made. The only way that President Jimmy Carter has ever made one.
What's the worst problem that your neighbors and y'all face? Jobs? Jobs. I'm convinced that if people are given a chance to work, if they're able, they will.
Over the past 4 years, this man has become a respected international leader. Each day he makes decisions that echo across the nation and around the world. Yet he understands the problems of ordinary Americans, as he always has. And because he cares about those problems, there's not a neighborhood in America where he would not feel at home.
There's still in our country, in spite of all the progress we've made, a need for more progress. And so what we need to do is not only to be proud of what we've done in the past, and not only to look at how bad we are in some areas of American life now, but to keep our eyes on the future. We're not going to come up to this point and stop all the progress in making sure that American citizens have a better life.
The president, he is bringing traditional American values to his vision of the nation's future.